Greetings, sword friends. It's fall or autumn again, which is my favorite season. I like spring too, but autumn always has the best color. And been through a lot this year, just trying to find positives and beauty in my life whenever I can. And today we're going to talk about this sword, the LK Chen Beiyang North Sea Warlord Cavalry Saber, which is based on the Prussian or Imperial German M1889 Cavalry Saber. And this thing is definitely a thing of beauty. And just the faithfulness of the recreation, how close it is to the original, and how joyful it is to wield such a sword. Whether you're a fan of military saber fencing or not, and this is a sword I can wholeheartedly recommend in your arsenal, and especially if you enjoy doing test cutting and you don't want to risk damaging an antique. Well, this sword is a mid-range reproduction. Usually sells for somewhere between $400 and $500, which is, the typical price point for LK Chen swords, and I think it's worth every penny. First of all, the M1889 Imperial German Cavalry Saber is a pretty prolific model and emulated a lot by other nations at the time. And this one being named the Beiyang Warlord. Beiyang just means North Sea, and the region that in the North Sea coastal area in northeast China, which used to be a region famous for its heavy industrial capacity. Nowadays, it's a very much agricultural area, and very much revived from all the slump and decline that's from the collapse of the PRC's decline of the heavy industrial policy, etc. Anyway, it was straight up Chinese military saber that's based on M1889 Cavalry Saber or Cavalier Degen. Well, I don't know why people call it a Prussian sword, because Prussia stopped being a nation from the forming of the German Empire. So the correct term should be the Imperial German Cavalry Saber. Now, this is listed in the Dao section of LK Chen's website, and some people have some issue with that. Well, it's not stereotypical Chinese Dao, which means single-edged sword. If you look at some of the late period Qing Dynasty Dao, they're more like falchions, right? Like a broad blade, and sometimes shorter in the blade length. Definitely would not invoke this image of a narrower saber with the complex hilt. Well, really, you have to look at the etymology of the word Dao, which actually just means single-edged sword of any origin. It doesn't really designate any country of origin or the style of sword, anything that's single-edged. Even knives, they can be called Dao, right? And so this is definitely a Dao, right? But it's a Jun Dao, right? A military saber, military sword. And despite of having a almost spear tip, this is a Prosser Quill tip, which we're going to talk about later. This is a single-edged sword through and through. Even the back edge, so to speak, has a bevel. It's not sharpened, so it's from the base to the tip is single-edged. There's no false edge cutting capacity. Well, you can whip someone in the face, it's gonna hurt, but it's not gonna cut, right? So the purpose of having this geometry is to increase the thrusting capacity, and the handling characteristics of the sword dictate that it's a very balanced cut and thrust sword. It's very precise in its tip, right? Like just a natural extension of your arm. I can't tell you how much of a joy this sword is in your hand, right? But I can tell you, if I want, I can, trim your eyelashes with the tip of the sword, right? It's to get it anywhere And the blade length is not really that short. It's 33¼ inches long, which is pretty long. Really not that long bladed, but you know, it's longer than the average blade, right? Even sabers. So I would say that it's a testament of the, you know, excellent mass distribution of the sword, you know, how well it handles, you know, especially when the sword is not really that heavy. It's overall 1 pound and 14 ounces, so about 1.9 pounds, 870 grams. Point of balance is at, you know, 3¾ inches, just over 9 millimeters from the hilt. So it feels a little bit like a rapier, right? And that is the handling characteristics observed on all swords based on M1889. Some of these have a stereotypical saber grind cross section, which is to say have a narrow blade but has a broad filler, and the bevel to the edge is not really that long. But since they can be very thin, right, you know, thickness can taper down dramatically, it can be efficient on the upper portion. And the typical one has a spear tip, not like this one. This one is called a pipeback cross section, which has a very prominent, very thick back, and then it immediately drops in thickness by more than half as it goes down the spine, and from there it gradually tapers on to the edge. This one here, you can see the cross section actually changes quite a bit, even though it's all pipe back, right? At the base, it has a ricasso, and the ricasso on this side is definitely still narrower, is thinner than the pipe back, but it gets thin very quickly. Over here at the base, the spine is at 8 millimeters, but at the ricasso is at 4. Still very beefy to ensure there's a lot of mass in the base, right? But it tapers down just from there, right? Like even just 6 inches from the base, it's still pretty thick on the spine because of the pipe back. You have 6 millimeters in thickness, but then immediately drop down here, even just 1/4 inch from the spine is at, you know, 3 millimeters already, and just goes down from there, right? The entire major beveled section is pretty much down from 3 millimeters down to 1, and there's a large section of the blade. This section, bevel section, is only at 1 millimeter or less, so very refined edge geometry. You can imagine as it bites into the target for quite a bit of a distance. So the blade is only over 1 millimeter thick, so it's really easy to have that initial incision, basically like a scalpel or a razor. But then it has a stronger spine due to the pipe back geometry to ensure the rigidity. And you can see here, yeah, this is when you see the flex like this, you know it's done right, right? The bottom, I would say, half of the blade or 3/5 of the blade does not flex at all, and it flexes more and more gradually as it approaches the tip, right? And there's no surprise at all. LK Chen has the original M1889 Imperial German Cavalry Saber, therefore, and of this relatively rare cross section, right? There's not the spear tip typical saber grind, but the Prosser Quill style pipe back blade. He did an exceedingly good job reproducing this. And you see on the upper portion, the spine goes into the center gradually, therefore has a, you know, beveled false edge, so to speak. It's not really sharpened, but it's very thin as well. So you have a broader breadth on the blade, on the upper 1/4 of the blade. So it has a little bit more mass, but also it makes the geometry, you know, like a spear tip. Therefore, it has better penetration, right? Rather than just curving off like the stereotypical. Putting down gingerly and grab the famous 1796 British light cavalry saber. You can see this has a hatchet tip. Obviously, this tip is better for cutting in this region. Very thin, tapered to be very thin, and also it's broad, right? So it carries some mass. It's broad and thin, so you have a very long bevel to taper down. So it has a very fearsome cutting capacity. Very accurate reproduction on this one. I already reviewed before, but this is definitely a more Cavalry Saber, very authoritative cutting, does a lot of work for you, but it's not as nimble as a full combat, right? Infantry saber. Ironically, this M1889 is also a cavalry saber, right? And it's widely adopted by the Chinese North Sea Warlords cavalry regiments. So it's supposed to be a very, authoritative cutter as well. But toward the end of the 19th century, all major powers employ these swords that are basically relatively nimble, maneuverable, but also good thruster on the horseback and cutter. And I have cut with this saber, and I have to say it's very, very nimble and just a very lively sword, right? Even though the blade is relatively long, probably longer than the typical arming sword that you use in one hand, the reproductions. But just a joy to handle, to cut with. It's really easy to flick with moulinet, and definitely a sword that geared towards both fighting on horseback but also on foot, right? Whereas the 1796 is also a relatively lightweight cutter, right? Good cutting capacity, but it's more like a falchion, right? Just geared towards a single cut, right? Very savage in its cutting capacity. Whereas this one, you can actually do a lot of swordplay, the saber fencing techniques, being such a lively blade. And you can imagine, the difference really justifies, right? Like you can see the blade on this one, the M1889, is so much narrower, but this is very typical. All the late 19th century military sabers have much narrower blades than earlier, 18th century and the early 19th century military swords. So basically, natural evolution of the sword. They weigh about the same, but this one has a point of balance much closer to the hand than this earlier cavalry saber. And of course, you can imagine trying to do thrusting with this. Look at the tip orientation. It's just such a curve, right, away from your hand. Therefore, you have to do these like a just curved thrust. Of course, it can do some damage, but it's not a straightforward thruster. Right? If you do this, you're gonna hit your opponent with this part of the edge, which can do some push cut damage, but it's not geared towards penetration, all that sort of thing. Let's just focus on the M1889 Cavalry Saber, North Sea Warlords. Oh, by the way, in the Republican Chinese period, there were many warlords that pledged allegiance or not to the Republican Party of China. Of course, the ones that refused to pledge allegiance were seen as rebels, and eventually they were quelled. But they were quite powerful for quite a while. They held their own local and private armies, not a power to be underestimated. And I know this because my great-grandfather used to be the maester of Beiyang warlord, and he was basically, in charge of his estate, but also, administration, right? Maester, or you can, I guess, translate it into Meister or something, just strategist and household administrator, magistrate, so to speak. But he lost his job when said warlord was assassinated, when the Imperial Japanese blowing up his train. Right? But they held a vast number of troops, including mechanized troops, cavalries. So adopting swords of the Western power was a decision at the time, to move away from the ethnic Chinese swords. Well, you can see it handles very differently from Chinese swords, right? They are less like falchion, right? Which is, there's a parallel here by being, more technologically advanced. These swords are definitely a step away from even the earlier European military sabers like the 1796. I would say that's more the purpose and the handling are more like a earlier period, like a medieval falchion, right? Like a storta, rather than a military saber. You can do a lot of fencing techniques with. So it's a natural evolution, obviously. The only difference between the Chinese variety is the plate. For the hand protection, you see a dragon insignia, right? And this is a sculpted relief, sculpted onto the surface. And I have seen other nations' cavalry sabers, such as the Argentinian cavalry saber adopting the M1889 German's cavalry saber. It has a different insignia, and you can see here, this is one being sold on the internet, an antique example. So it has the Argentinian insignia on that. The original German ones have Imperial eagle, so that's a very appropriate. So if you come across one of these antiques, all you have to do is look at the plate, insignia on the plate, and you will instantly see what kind of what nation of origin the saber belongs to. And I will say that the thickness of the plate is appropriate. Seems quite sturdy, but not overly thick. About 2 millimeters in thickness. And given the point of balance, 3 3/4 inch, it seemed to be appropriate weight for the entire sword, the hilt, right? You don't want it to be overly heavy, and it's not symmetrical, right? Because the inside of the hand is not so vulnerable. The outside can use some more protection. When you wear the sword, the inside wouldn't, bend on your hip that much to become a annoyance, basically. So it's a good design. It's not a 3-bar, 2-bars design, but it's very close. The plate is perforated with multiple holes, so it reduces the weight, making it not overly chunky, but it has the bar design. Right? Stop a cut is very easy, but there's a chance for a thrust tip to go through these perforations, obviously. And also, interestingly enough, many of these insignias on the plate are also perforated, while this dragon insignia is just a solid, low relief sculpture, that is. So maybe that adds a little bit weight to the hilt, but overall the handling just works. Right? So if you practice military saber, want to do some test cutting with techniques, definitely check this one out. Even if you're not a fan of sabers, this is just a good sword, right? A good cut and thrust, balanced sword. Late period sword is used even up until the World War I period. One interesting fact about this design is that they have a solid grip construction. It doesn't have the wood core and leather wrapping on top, as seen in many early 19th century swords, military swords. Those are just one solid piece. It's not wood, it's some kind of man-made material. Is it plastic or polymer? But it's very durable. The drawback is that once you don't have the leather wrapping, there's less cushioning. So if there's a big impact, heavy impact, you will feel the reverberation. Okay, but then overall it has this very good design of a finger choil, so to fit your index finger. Basically, it's a pistol grip. You hold it like this, very comfortable. I just want to elaborate more on the utility of this finger notch or finger choil. Actually, finger choil is not the right word because usually it's at the back of the blade, the steel part. You can see it really assists pulling of the grip. You can do this pistol grip, easy manipulation of the tip, the point, given how lively it already is. And the back of the grip has the right amount of curvature for you to hold on to the sword. And all the ribbing, for her pleasure, provides enough traction. And the rivets are not standing proud, make the whole grip very comfortable. And you can see the silhouette of the grip really assists with the handling. The plastic is not overly slippery due to the ribbing, and the presence of the heel, the base of the grip, really helps with retention. So just a very well designed grip. Fits the overall sword very well. It's a very girthy grip, right? Which usually I don't like. I like medium size, like just about right. Right? Being very thin, it can rotate in your hand, and you try to hold on to it very tightly. So that doesn't feel good. Being too thick that your fingers cannot wrap around it, it's also going to be very tiring to hold on to, right? And well, the usual good girth of a grip is that your finger can just meet the base of your thumb, and that will be a good cross section, right? Well, this one's a little girthy on the girthier side, but I bet this is based on the originals, the antiques measurement, because LK Chen acquired one of these M1889 German Cavalry Saber with this specific Prosser Quill cross section, that is. So the grip must be, very accurate. Maybe it was even based on mold on the original. I don't know, but it has to be very similar, right? But this one, the girthiness doesn't really bother me that much because I put my thumb on the back. It doesn't have a back strap, but you can put your finger on the back of this grip and it goes very well. And this is like assistance for your stance. You want to keep this tip in front of you to create certain stretch rather than the typical saber fencing like this, so it's easier to cut. Whereas you want a stance that's more between a small sword fencing, like or military spadoon fencing, and the typical saber fencing. So because of the tip, right? And this tip, according to Matt Easton of Scholar Gladiatoria, is partially based on Ultimate swords. Have to be very careful. You can see this is a 15th century Ultimate Killage. Obviously, it's like a saber, early saber, right? But broader. I would say that many European miniature sabers were inspired by Ultimate swords, but you can see the claim of emulating Ultimate swords, especially on the upper portion, has some validity, of course, because you look at the killage, it swells up near the tip, so it has like a wider blade for good cutting capacity. Add some mass to the upper portion. Of course, it tapers to be very thin, so you have a very fine edge bevel, but also it has this geometry to make a tip that's closer to a spear tip, right? Closer to a tip found on double-edged swords, and actually you have a central ridge in the middle to ensure the rigidity. So this will be a good thrusting sword as well. If you look at the Prosser Quill tip, you can see there's some similarity for sure. This is definitely like narrower, but there are some broader Prosser Quill tip swords, and they're very similar to Ultimate swords, right? And so basically to ensure this is a good cut and thrust sword, right? It's a good compromise. So definitely a joy to handle, right? It's pinpoint position, easy to accelerate, and you can see how easy it is to accelerate, right? The blade glides through the air, very loud sword because of the cross section. All the blades with large footers or hollow grind geometries, right? They are very loud to generate a whistling sound when you cut through the air, and you will know whether your edge alignment is sound, right? If you see, there's no sound, but if you do it right, then this way it doesn't have any sound because the edge is not aligned with the movement of the blade, right?
Okay.
So, very good training tool, test cutting, etc. This is a saber, of course, because nobody is talking about this saber. LK Chen has a few military sabers. One is American Union M1860 Cavalry Saber, also an excellent one, but it's heavier than this one, right? A little bit longer, also a joy to handle. Very easy cutter as well. Of course, LK Chen also produced a 1796 British Light Cavalry Saber based on antique. That one is also very refined, probably even more so than many originals. This one is a good example, and I hope more people can get their hands on this one. But LK Chen doesn't talk about this one that much, right? He enjoyed talking about Chinese swords, and he has turned up so many new models this year. And I just hope that this one can get some attention. There you go. You have the Beiyang Sea Warlord Chinese Cavalry Saber based on the original M1889 Imperial German Cavalry Saber made in Solingen, Germany. If you enjoy this review, definitely give this sword a shot. Link in the description down below. Preferably you order directly from LK Chen. But you can do it from Calvacina as well. Also comes with a good steel scabbard. The muzzle scabbard, it's a little too close to comfort, right? I would say that be careful when you draw it. It's a little easier because it's a single-edged sword. There's no back edge, right? So just make sure the spine is pressed against the back of the scabbard and draw it so it wouldn't dull your blade. Other than that, it's a pretty good steel scabbard. Fits really well. Retention is excellent. And I will wholeheartedly recommend this model. If you enjoyed this review, finding any value or entertainment, please like and subscribe.